Hi, and welcome to Beyond the Storm. I'm Selena, your host, and today I have a very special guest with me. I have Sarah Cates. Sarah has a history of family generational drug addiction, and she comes to us with a story of what those years were like for her, and then a history that turned the corner, and now she works in recovery. So I am super excited to bring Sarah to the show today. Sarah and I also share a little bit of history. Sarah knew my son Stephen briefly during some of the period of time he was looking at recovery. So when I spoke with Sarah, I was really excited about having her come on the show because she brings a perspective that I think a lot of people in recovery experience. But as a mother who has recently lost my son, it's always nice to sit down and talk to somebody who's had an interaction with him. So, everybody, join me. Thank you for coming today.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you being here, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So let's just jump in from the very beginning. I just want you to kind of comfortably walk through and share with me a little bit about what brought you here today.
Okay.
And I'm sure it was a lot of years in the making.
Absolutely.
Okay.
To be where I am today, sitting here talking to you, if you would have told me this would be what happens in my life, I would have never believed you. So I grew up in Olathe, Kansas, which is in Johnson County. For those that are from this area, that's a area most people don't associate with bad choices and a rough.
Johnson County.
Yeah,
Yeah,
those.
the Johnson County kids. Yeah,
Yes,
I remember.
yes, and that's funny because growing up, my family was really good at creating a facade that we appeared as if we were the Johnson County family.
Mhm.
However, behind closed doors, that's not the same situation that was occurring. So,
And that's not uncommon. I mean, there's a lot of what goes on in our house stays in our house. You don't go out and tell your business. So that's not uncommon in families that know that their choices are bad, but they don't want everybody else to see that.
absolutely. And I think for a kid growing up in that, it was hard to understand that. I mean, people were seeing what was happening. It wasn't like that everybody didn't know. And so to have to pretend to people.
Living a double life.
Absolutely, from a very young age. So, yeah, learning how to master that, that was a skill that I never really wanted to acquire, yet I became very good at it.
Well, and the loyalty you probably felt towards your family, because I think most kids, regardless of the trauma that they're dealing with, whether it be families that are dealing with addiction, or maybe it's a family that has mental illness, or a family dealing with domestic violence. Children always try to protect that family or that mother or father because of the natural loyalty involved.
So you just nailed all three things that
Mm,
occurred in my
yeah.
family. My both of my parents were drinkers, and that always escalated. It never became a they I don't remember times where they were happy and drunk. That wasn't a thing. And so the emotional and the physical abuse came along with that. And I mean, I remember that from a very young age, and I remember, like, learning patterns of their behavior. My parents owned a restaurant, and so if the restaurant closed and somebody wasn't home within the reasonable time frame that I had learned, something was happening, and it normally whatever parent was at home, the other one was escalating on, they're at home escalating in their way, and the other parent's out doing, I don't whatever. The
So you are at that young age, you recognized the roller coaster that that is involved in drinking or
Oh, for sure.
yeah, that's interesting.
Looking back, I realized what the patterns were, but I didn't understand what was happening, if that makes sense. I mean, I did to a point, but
You were hypersensitive to that
oh, for
because
sure.
you had been conditioned to see that or
For sure.
to experience that trauma.
Well, and it kind of trickled down, like your parents are walking on eggshells, shit's gonna hit the fan, what's gonna happen today?
Yeah.
It's a lot, it's very unpredictable. The unpredictability of my childhood looking back now, like at the time, because my parents were really good at making it seem as if everything was great. I never wanted for anything, and
Were you trying to fix situations so that thing
hey,
didn't blow up?
all the time.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
Thank you. I developed perfectionism. That's my That's a that's a default of what
Yeah.
happens when you're raised in trauma.
Right.
You become I thought that if I could manipulate the situation enough, that if I could just get good grades or if I could be this kid over here or get your attention over here,
People pleaser.
all
Yeah.
of it, take
Yeah.
your pick. And nothing was working. So that wasn't fixing them. I remember when I was about, I think I was probably like 13, 14. I don't There was a club in Kansas here. This already is red flag city. I mean, this is probably lining the pathway that I'm not gonna make the best choices in life. However, my parents were all wrapped up in their own bullshit, so nobody was really whatever. We weren't really on the same page, I guess.
Well, and I also think that's generational for, I'm making the assumption we're close in age, but
I bet we are.
I I'm I remember our parents let us do a lot more. We were range kids. We
uh
were allowed to be gone and allowed to.
I don't ever remember my parents, like, double checking where I was going. Like, they
Exactly,
just said, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna go stay over here," and my parents like, "Okay, well, I'm okay."
right?
I mean, I
There was a
was
lot of, "I'm staying the night over here," but I was really over here, and
absolutely,
I'm assuming that probably was the same situation.
absolutely, and there were a lot of instances that, so back when I was growing up, there was Santa Fe. Everybody cruised Santa Fe.
Yep.
That was a giant thing in Olathe, Kansas, and people came from other places to do it. So I was out on the Fe, cruising the Fe when I was like 13 years old. I mean, what? I have a
Nolan
third.
Road.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah,
did
yeah.
Nolan Road. Yeah.
We're one and the same.
Yeah.
I've been down Nolan a few
Yeah.
times. I have a 13-year-old daughter today that if my like trying to wrap my mind around and be a mother to a 13-year-old and know what I was doing when I was 13, you're out of your damn ass mind.
Yeah.
No, we're not
Yeah.
doing that.
I find myself sometimes thinking back and what the hell was my mother thinking
Right.
to allow me to do that?
Well, and I
Exactly.
think my parents at that point, when at that point, things were just trash at my house. I mean, I had a little brother who was 3 years younger than me, and, my parents would just fight and wreck cars, I mean, all the time. They'd buy brand new cars, and then they'd wreck them. And I don't remember my parents, like they always had cash. So this was just strange things that happened in my life.
Right.
My dad ran an all-cash restaurant up until the very end when before he closed, he recently started taking credit cards. However, it was all cash. So I operated in this all cash world growing
Hmm.
up. And so my parents would buy cars with cash. My dad didn't have credit cards, just it was what I was used to. I don't know where the cash was coming from. I guess it was coming from the restaurant. I don't know of anything else, but I grew up thinking that you had to have cash. Cash was the
Right.
ways to the means. And so I know that at this point, my parents they had wrecked brand new cars, brand new motorcycles. It was bad. And I remember telling my mom, if you don't leave, I'm leaving. Like, I can't do this anymore. And I thought that would be the catalyst of like, shit'll get better.
Hmm.
No, it did not. It got worse.
Wow.
It did not get better. My mom My parents' home was paid off, and so my dad left, and my mom had a home that was paid for. She had never worked anywhere else in her entire life other than for my dad at his restaurant. So that was the only job she had since she was 16, and now she has no job history because my dad's probably not going to give her a great
Right. Right.
recommendation. So,
So her whole world was associated and tied up with him.
sure. And the drinking. So now she's got every reason in the world to drink even more than we were
Her
drinking
world is
before.
crumbling. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, oh, it had already crumbled. I mean, she was
Well, the stability of having a job,
oh, yeah,
yeah, that security was gone. So
absolutely.
I'm sure that was a very scary time for her.
I mean, I remember previous to this, so my mom used to have me lie to my father for her. That was a big thing. Like, my mom would pay me with liquor, and I would sit in her car outside of the bar, so I would lie to my mom so she could go in the bar and drink. So my mom was on all kinds of inappropriateness long before my father and her
Yeah.
ever got divorced,
Yeah.
and I have a feel
Those good choices went out the window a long
correct.
time ago. Yeah.
Correct. And I'm gonna go with my dad probably wasn't making equally as of healthy choices for their relationship. And so I learned to lie. Like I that
So,
was
2 very dysfunctional people
uh-huh.
with children
Uh-huh.
making tough decisions that are gonna affect their kids or inappropriate decisions that are gonna affect their kids, and nobody holding them accountable.
No one.
Yeah.
My dad's parents, so my dad came from a family, he was adopted, and his parents my dad always had money to get himself out of whatever situation he was in, but when my parents got divorced, my dad did quit drinking, but that was the my dad did he drank, I think, for a little bit and had, like not long. Like, my dad hasn't drank in over 30 years, I feel like, at
Mhm.
this point. It's been a long time. So, my dad did round a corner and become someone different. My mom did not. My mom went the other direction.
Yeah.
It was like she resorted back to being a teenager.
She got freedom,
It was messy.
but it came at a cost, I'm
It
sure.
was it was a lot,
Yeah.
a whole lot.
Sounds like he was holding her accountable for what little bit of accountability he was willing to expect out of her.
Yes.
So, when that was gone, it was, no breaks.
And my mom's side of the family is very we don't talk about anything. No one has anything.
That's that generation
No one
too.
has anything wrong with them. So my mom comes from she had 3 sisters and 1 brother. Undiagnosed mental health, undiagnosed alcoholism, didn't I mean, it now I know more about my family on that side, and yes, my grandmother had mental illness, her mother had mental illness, I had a grandmother that lost her life to suicide, I mean, like, there are a lot of indicators that because I believe of the generational thing,
Yeah.
that just didn't get talked about, so
Right. No, and it's not just exclusive to your family. It was the same in a lot of families. I was pretty lucky we didn't have the mental illness attached to it, but I had a very close friend of mine who basically it was kind of a unwritten rule: don't come over until you call,
Sure.
because her dad could be just
Hmm?
straight up cray cray, and she didn't want people to see
Oh, I
that.
already know.
And we didn't stay the night at her house. We
Uh-huh.
always came to my house. So I seen that from an outsider. So I can and it's not exclusive to just your family. It is that generational um that not generational, but that generation you just didn't talk about it. It's
Mm-mm.
not what you share with your neighbors or your friends.
No, feelings were not a thing.
Oh yeah.
That's new. Nobody. The only thing you can feel, I'm pretty sure I learned is either happy or pissed. That was the two. Like there
Right.
was not anything
Yeah.
other in between. So I learned to do those,
Yeah.
appropriately.
Yeah. I lost a father at the age of 6. My
Oh,
father died in a tragic accident and unexpected, and I wouldn't dream of having a child today without getting them counseling if they lost a parent.
oh, for sure.
Counseling wasn't even an option.
No,
We weren't, "Oh, you're fine. You're
right,
fine.
right,
Everything's gonna be fine." But that was I don't necessarily blame my mother for that, it's all she knew,
sure,
and the same as probably your parents, that's all they knew,
absolutely,
because we didn't talk about those things. We didn't have those conversations, and nobody was saying, "Are you gonna get her into counseling?"
right. And
But
hey, how are
now
you feeling today?
right,
Or
exactly.
right,
Now that's the first thing that's out of somebody's mouth
absolutely,
"Who's your counselor? Who are you talking to?"
for sure.
So
I would say that I think in my family, specifically on my mom's side, it was everybody had a little bit of something going on. I think, mental illness and addiction kind of go, substance use go hand in
go hand
hand.
in hand.
Self medicating is a thing. I think that's what my family tried to do. And as long as there was nothing major that was gonna,
There wasn't anything socially in unex or in everybody socially drank
sure,
back in those days. I can't remember a time that my mother remarried and I had a stepfather that was basically my father. He had a Budweiser in his
right.
hand every
I mean,
yeah, it
my
was
dad was drinking Coors Lights out of cans and
yeah,
smoking Marlboros. I
right.
mean, like, and
That
we weren't wearing seat belts.
right.
Like, there was not a lot of caution to things that,
Exactly. That generation of the Marlboro Man and Budweiser,
yes,
the Bud Man, all of that generation, that was the expected norm. And some of the people of that generation didn't come out of it.
mm-mm.
They didn't they were so far into it.
This
So,
it's So and it's so funny looking at all this now, sitting here talking to you, just thinking about it. Also, like, with my dad, I
Did you have a family that if you wanted to drink, you could drink at home?
when I was little, when I was younger, I could do
Teenager.
whatever I wanted. I mean,
Teenager.
oh, we haven't even got
I had a
started.
family that basically, well, if you wanna drink, you can just drink right here.
Sure.
I mean, and that was normal. You can't go anywhere, but you can drink here.
So
You
I don't
but
remember.
that's not something I would say okay to my kids
Oh,
now.
no.
"No, we're not drinking.
No, not yeah.
We're gonna go find healthier options."
I could say, like, for me, I don't ever remember wanting to my mom was giving me liquor. I mean, I was getting liquor. My parents both smoked a lot of weed, and I knew that, and so I was taking their roaches and smoking weed when I was probably, like, 13 or 14, I wanna say.
Yeah.
And when I was around that same like, the time framing is really blurry, I don't know, but when I was around that same age, my parents I told my mom, "You gotta go," whatever, and my parents split up, and my dad moved out, and my mom had kept the house, it's paid for, and, that just I had everybody and anybody running in and out of this house, like, I
Mhm.
mean, bad. I mean, and, like, people that I had no business having around. I mean, one of the gentlemen that lived in my home is a convicted murderer, like, murdered 2 women I know. Like, what? And I was 14 and this man lived in my house.
Yeah.
Hmm? And looking back, like, my mom wasn't there to be a parent. She wasn't.
She wasn't doing very good at taking care of herself, let
No,
alone taking care of you.
absolutely not. She couldn't take care of herself at all.
Yeah.
No. I was the parent.
So it was a role reversal for you.
Yes. I was the taking care of her.
And so tell me how you transitioned from that teenager. Where did that take you?
So when my mom brought a gentleman home from the bar one night and he never left. He became my stepfather. He's a good man. They've had their things whatever, but he came home and I was not with that. I was like, "Well, you're not, I don't know you from nobody, buddy." So and they were trying to impose rules because that's what we're going to try to do now because we're going to have this weirdo family.
Well, because we have a man in the house and I have to
Correct.
show them that I've been a mother and I can
Right.
be a mother. Yeah.
Whatever weird shit was happening and I wasn't with it. And so
Mhm.
they gave me the ultimatum was if I wasn't going to go to high school, then I could move out. And I was great. I'll leave then. So I moved my junior year of high school to Shawnee Mission, Kansas to live at my dad's with my dad and my grandparents. And my
Mhm.
grandfather was passing away of cancer at the
Oh.
time. Um, and I was expected to go to an entirely different high school where I knew no one. I'm gonna sound like Johnson County Sarah here in a second when I say this, but oh well. They didn't have air conditioning in the high school when I went, and I was like, "You have gotta be fucking kidding me. I cannot sit in the heat and focus." And it's like, I'm dripping sweat, and you want me to
So your
retain
whole world is
information.
turned upside down,
Absolutely.
what you're used to, what's been, your normal expectation
Uh-huh.
has now been taken away from you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
When
And
me
I'm going to say this as a junior in high school, you know, your relationships and friendships are everything
Oh,
in
sure,
that age.
absolutely.
You're not being, Johnson, and then that's probably only going to be local to us, but in this Missouri Kansas battle
Sure, sure, sure,
between the
sure.
two states, probably nobody else would understand it. But um, you know the Johnson County, I don't know, the reputation of what you're referring to, that doesn't have anything to do with what has basically uprooted your entire life.
Oh, yeah.
That's your friends no longer in your daily life. That's new classes, new teachers, new environment, new household, and dealing with grandparents that are ill.
Hmm?
That's a lot to take on as a teenager.
It was not.
Coming from no rules to
Oh,
now a
yeah.
household of people probably paying attention to you.
Oh, yeah, everybody was paying attention.
Yeah.
Everybody was paying attention, and, me being the person that I had learned to be at this point, I had learned the manipulation. I learned that my
Yeah.
whole life. So I went to my dad and proposed as a business idea, "Hey, I'm not gonna go to high school. I'm gonna drop out. I'm gonna get my GED. I'm gonna go to work. I'm gonna pay my car off. I'm gonna do these things because I just going to high
Because you're
school."
not having it.
Oh, no, it was not.
I'm not having
I
it.
was like, "I'm not doing that." And he let me. So I dropped out of high school when I was 16 and I took my GED 2 weeks after I dropped out.
What was wrong with our parents back
I
then?
think yeah.
I did the same thing. I dropped out of high
Did
school.
you?
I did.
Yeah.
I left. I'm not having it.
No, I just was over it. I was like, "This is bullshit, and I'm just wasting my time,
Yeah.
and I could go to work and do all these things." And so I did what I held up my bargain. I did, got my GED and I went to college and, but I'm still running around. At this point, I've got a taste of all the people because I mean, I had run around with all the nonsense back over at mom's house and I'm still going out to the fair. I've made all these unhealthy friendships looking back and, so I'm still running around with everybody.
Yeah.
And at this point,
You're just sleeping somewhere else.
oh yeah, oh
That's
yeah. And, I had a car, so we're going wherever we want. Um, and I got introduced. So I'd met a girl at cruising the Fae, and we became friends. And in course of us being friends, we were smoking weed together. We went to college together. We were hanging out. We were thick as thieves, and we started doing coke together. I feel like she had a boyfriend that did coke that worked at Hooters. Maybe I think was the way that this went. We started doing cocaine somehow. I don't know. And then, so that was like the first introduction to like drugs to me is what seemed like drugs.
Do you remember the first time? Do you remember when you
No,
started using it and
no,
no?
that's how, no, because it wasn't that. I mean, no, I mean,
It was just a normal progression up to the
yeah,
next one.
uh-huh. It was just something I was doing. And so I started using cocaine with her and then, and I'm not ever gonna pay for drugs. We're not doing that. That's a hustle. I'm not trying to come out of pocket for this stuff. And so in the court, I'd been smoking weed and been around weed for a while. And this gal that I was friends with, she was from she was from closer to the Missouri side. So she knew more people than I knew. And she had ran in a different area. And so we had gone to the movies out at Ward Parkway because we were still doing those types of things at this time. I had to have been like 17, maybe. And so we go out to the movies at Ward Parkway and we write these bad boys coming down the escalator this note. She wrote these bad boys. She left it with the security guard of this guy that she thought was hot. And looking back, like it's a train wreck, right? Well, it's a train wreck, it's bad. And she gives a note to the security guard. Anyways, we get hooked up with these boys that are from these guys that are from Ruskin. So now we're the good Johnson County girls that are hooked up with these bad boys in Ruskin. And that does it's I mean, go over there and then I remember, so I can tell you this. I remember walking into an apartment and it was the first time I'd ever met this guy. I ended up marrying his brother. So the first time I ever walked in his apartment, we were going over there to I don't who knows what. And he was like, "Do you want to do a line of coke?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to look stupid,
Right,
whatever."
right.
And he pulls out like a machete. I mean, it's like a machete and a mountain of cocaine. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do now. Like, I'm just used to like the I'm like, we do a couple lines and I'm like, you got this mountain, and I was like, okay, this is gonna be bad. Did I leave? No. It excited me. I was like, oh, what do you guys you guys are great.
The ultimate, fear as the enticer.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was like, well, this is neat. And then they were cool, like they seemed this is back, and I mean, it's I shouldn't laugh, but it is funny to me. Like looking like I lived in some weird rap song. Like that's what I feel like looking back. Like I lived in a Master P like rap song is what it
Right.
was. And I'd met these guys. I had no business talking to them. Just so happens I had a girl that knew that was dating a Mexican guy from over on the west side, so we could get the weed and they could get everything else, and it became a normal thing.
Just be the relationships that you developed in order to indulge in what your party favors were.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, and it became very lucrative. I mean, the weed thing was not like it is today. So
No.
it was either you had good weed or you had bad weed. It was not confusing
You
and
had Johnson County ditchweed
yes,
or you
a
had
little bit of a lime green situation. Yeah, yes. And so I got wrapped up doing that at a real young age. I mean, I had, met some people. That's how it happens. I happen to know the people that you needed over here. And so
and I feel like meeting people back then was so much easier.
absolutely.
Everybody was doing a little bit of something back
Sure.
then. It's not the same as what's happening now. But I am reminiscing as you're telling your story. I'm reminiscing of those days that I dabbled in a little bit of this, a little
Mhm,
bit of that. And I wasn't a kid that ever got in trouble.
mhm.
I somewhere along the way I went
Sure,
go this direction where a lot of my friends went that direction.
sure.
And I can't tell you what made that transition from one direction to the next, but I was right where you're describing too. So
Mhm.
there's a little bit of connection I'm having here with what you're sharing.
I think I think that time in our lives, that time in our lives, people interacted with each other in a totally different capacity,
Yeah, we didn't have cell phones.
No, when we went skating and, we went out to the Faye and to Nolan Road, there were opportunities to interact on a one, like in
House
a
parties.
yeah, field parties. I've been to countless field parties, just different things that, yeah, like you're saying, kids don't get to do today for lack of a, I mean, I don't know if it'd be better, me.
I don't know either.
I don't know, but
I
the
mean,
lack of the human relationship is crazy to me today.
yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah, it's a different generation, and in some ways it's scarier, but at the same time, we had a lot more freedom
Uh-huh.
to screw up,
Uh-huh.
and we could be a whole lot worse off before we would get any help
Sure.
versus everybody's noticing when behavior changes with somebody because they're right up under our nose,
Sure.
in some cases. So as you progressed out of your teenage years, um, you're making connections and communicating with people that are getting you your party favors. Where did it take the where did you jump off the cliff at?
So when I was 18, 5 days after my 18th birthday, I was arrested for felony possession of cocaine for the first time in Johnson County, Kansas. So, I went to jail. I'd never been in trouble a day in my life. I was blowing lines off a shoebox lid at 98.9 The Rock in parking lot for God knows what reason, and, I ended up getting arrested, and, I didn't call anybody,
So
like
let's back up just a second. So 98.9 The Rock is one of the bigger rock stations in Kansas City for people who aren't in the
yeah,
Kansas City
sorry.
area. That's been a uh, generational. Um, 98.9 The Rock has been around for a lot of years, and it wasn't just your generation, it was the generation after that until recently when it's no longer, I guess it's changed
Correct.
hands, but it was an institution in Kansas
It's a
City.
staple. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely a staple. My girlfriend, that was my really good friend at the time, she had gone to Bishop Miege High School, and so she was a different her house was down the block from 98.9 The
Mhm.
Rock, and so
Mhm.
that was what we would do. We'd go blow lines at 98.9 The Rock, and we'd go back to her mom's house, whatever. We were at home, that's what we were trying to tell ourselves.
So down in a parking lot
Yeah,
there, just hanging
just
out
in
in
the
the
parking
parking
lot.
lot?
Mm,
Okay.
mm,
All right.
not safe, whatever,
Right.
at all. Uh
Yeah, it's not in a great neighborhood.
It's Mission. I mean, it's right on the it was in Westwood at the time, so maybe it's moved. It's moved a few
I
times,
think
I
so.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I went to jail in Westwood, and they don't even have a jail, so I got, like, Andy Griffith jail for the first time, like, just handcuffed to a bench, and then they took us out to Johnson County, and,
That was probably an eye opener.
oh, it's crazy. It was I mean, I'd been coked out for a few days, so, I mean, I just went to bed, and I didn't call anybody. Like, I'm 18, I've never been in trouble. I don't know how this works. I'm not, I don't know, and so I get I remember being in jail there, and they gave us, like, an abundance of rules. It was like an overload of, if you have 3 pieces of candy, you can only have 2, and the 3rd one's contraband. If you cross this line, you're out of bounds. I'm like, "I don't know what the hell they're talking about, like, this is a whole lot."
It's a foreign language.
Right,
It's a
like, "This is
different
a
environment.
whole lot. I'm just gonna stay in my bed and not do anything, and you'll yell at me when it's time to do something, I'm sure." And so I think I was there 4 days roughly, and these papers, they call me up there, and the ladies, they're like, "Roll your stuff up," and I'm like, "Okay," and they push my bond papers through the window, and it says my dad's name on it, and I hadn't called my dad, and I'm like, "What the fuck?" I push him back. I was like, "I'm cool. I'll stay." I was like, I'm good over here. Like, I don't know
I'll
why
stay in
he's
jail
here."
versus deal with my
Correct. I'm
dad.
not sure what's happening right now, and I don't know how he knows I'm here, and I learned at that time that you cannot refuse a bond, and I was like, "Well, great." So, when back then, when you bonded out of Johnson County, you had to walk down this, like, hallway, this, like, long hallway of shame, and then I get there, and my dad's like, "Your taxes are due. You need to sign your taxes," and I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "How did you know I was here?" He's like, "I called your job and they told me, because I had called my job when I had a free phone call to let them know that I was not gonna be at work the
Gonna be
next
at
day."
work.
Right, and so
Told you to
they
hand up.
yeah.
Might be a few days.
Right. So they let my dad know that I was in jail, and so that's how my dad came to get me, and my dad put his house up for, uh-huh, all the whole cash bond for me.
Wow.
Mhm. I didn't get better. Um, I picked up another felony possession of cocaine charge 3 months later while out on
Out on bond.
bond supervision. The probation before probation.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
I'm very familiar with these
Yes.
terms from
So I was
Stephen, and
on
Stephen was notorious for doing that too.
Yes, I was on bond supervision and got picked up another felony case. So now I have 2 felony cases in Johnson County, Kansas at the same time in 2 different courts, but with the same district attorney. And so the first case,
How did your dad take that? I mean, is he the one that was steady in your life?
I was
Okay.
living at dad's.
Yeah.
He
How did
doesn't
he
say
take that?
nothing. There was no discussion. Like, my dad was never one to, so it's, and this blows my mind. Like, my dad and mom would fight, screaming, yelling, I mean, all the nonsense. My dad has never raised his voice and yelled at me. The only thing my dad has ever said to me is, "I'm disappointed." Like,
Yeah, that probably tore you up too.
that's like the worst thing, even as an adult today. That is like, I would rather have you scream at me in my face and
Yeah.
than to say that you're disappointed in me. Uh-huh.
So you're out running amok and he's just
Uh-huh.
standing around watching it happen.
Uh-huh. I mean, so this was, I'm going to school. I have a job, my car's paid for, I'm trying to create the facade that things are not as bad as they are. I'm in this court mess now that I've got going on, and thankfully, I don't know if I should say thankfully, but in this time I had met my first husband, and so I'd met him, I told you, at the Mountain of Cocaine. And we were together, and I get sentenced to probation. So my first case got dropped because the police officer had said on the recording that if we gave him our weed, he would let us leave. And so I'd given him the weed, and that turned into bringing the dogs, which then they found the cocaine. So the judge literally in that case said, "Did you tell them that they could leave if they gave him the weed?" And he said yes on the stand, and they were like, "Watch him walk out now." And I was like, "Yeah, that was epic. That's legendary." I was like, "That's the best." Mind you, I still have another felony case. And so same DA, so she's not happy. And I mean, like, the whole circumstances with that was you couldn't use the first case against me in the second case. And the second
Right.
like
Right.
she was pissed. So then in the second case, I ended up getting 5 years intensive supervised probation in the state of Kansas, which is not a walk in the park. I had to I had to go to drug class like twice a week, and I was on color code, and I'm pissing in a cup twice a week, and I'm never clean. I'm smoking weed the entire time. I have now first husband and I are now together, and we're selling hundreds of pounds of weed a week. Like, I'm not
No deterrent against what was,
no,
supposed to stop you in your tracks.
no.
You dug in deeper.
Yeah, the probation didn't do anything. I mean, one, probation's expensive. Like, there's that. I mean, I'm 20 years old maybe at the time or whatever the hell it was, and I'm 21. I don't know what. But I don't have money to pay. Drug class is like $50 a week, and then you want me paying for UAs, and I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna have to sell drugs to pay for the probation for the drugs." Like, it was insanity, just even that. And I mean, and I worked and my husband worked and we bought a home. I had my first child when I was 23. And I was the creating the facade. It was the exact same environment.
You just stepped right into what you were
Absolutely.
living or what you had grown up as.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Literally, like, to the T. Like, I bought my dad's house. I mean, like, to the T, we weren't drinking, but we were
Your DOC or your drug of choice was
weed at this
weed at
point.
that time. Yeah.
Uh-huh. But I've ran my course with all of them. So after the whole cocaine situation happened and I get onto the probation, I never touched cocaine again. I was like, "Oh, I'm good. I don't want to do that anymore."
Learn my lesson.
Uh-huh.
I'll stick with this.
I'll just keep doing weed. That was the consistent. Pills, I had started in the course of, whoever I'd sell weed to, whatever they had, they were going to give me because I had what they wanted. So they were always trying to get a better deal. And so it was a big like bartering. And so like I would get pills from whoever. And, so at this point I had started taking Xanax. And that, that was like that was like my best friend.
Yeah. So you discovered that was something that took away it all.
Everything.
The crap.
Everything was gone. I could manage kids. I could, I could run a household. I could tolerate my husband. Everything was okay as if I was taking Xanax. And so I'm on felony probation, so I have to find a doctor to get me said
Yeah,
Xanax.
to legitimately write that script. Yeah.
Correct.
Yep.
So this is probably, maybe early 2000s it had to have been because doctors were still doing that then.
Mhm.
Um,
They still doing it today.
yeah, you gotta find the right one. Yeah,
I
that's
got Xanax written to me right before Stephen passed away,
uh,
and probably legitimately needed it
uh,
because I was, you know.
I think that there yeah, it's funny you say that. I think there's a all those medications are designed with a purpose. I mean,
Mhm.
I just tend to not do things for their
Right, right.
intended
Yeah.
purpose. That's
I
the
mean, you get the script written because you're not looking to take it once a week.
no.
You're looking to, get by every single day with it,
Yes.
multiple times a day. Yeah.
Yes. And so in the course of that with my first husband, I taking a lot of pills. I had let me back up a little bit, like in this, because a whole lot of crap happens in this time. So, like, I'd been arrested twice. Clearly, I'm not making good choices. I was eating tons of mushrooms, taking acid. I mean, take your pick. I was drinking Special
Just a
K.
menagerie of whatever was
Oh,
coming your way.
everything, everything, everything. And at one point, I was with a few of my girlfriends. This is such I shouldn't laugh. See, this is where it's bad. I tell people these things because a lot of people say, "Well, your trauma shapes you," and I start talking about my life, and they're like, "Oh my god," like, how did this?" And I'm like, "Well, we're 21 years old when this happens. Just hold on. I'm 47 today."
Well, and the thing, I think what's really, I mean, it was not what you're describing in that period of time. A lot of people were doing that.
Sure.
It wasn't like that was the extreme, because today the extreme is somebody's using fentanyl and heroin and they're nodding out,
Uh
or
huh.
trank, and they're just, that's extreme. But back then, everybody was smoking pot.
Everybody was doing
Everybody was getting
everything.
drunk.
Uh
Everybody
huh.
was playing around with a little bit of cocaine. There
Absolutely.
was a lot of acceptance of what the party favors were,
Yes.
until it was so bad, it was a mess for everybody.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that I definitely surrounded myself with individuals that supported what I was trying to do. I've
Mhm.
always
They normalized it. There wasn't anything wrong.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not paying for my drugs. So that's never been, I've
Right.
always tried. It sounds so bad. Like
No,
I'm going to
that's
date the plug,
right.
that's what it was. I
Well,
mean,
I'm gonna be honest with you. I've seen that too. I've seen and to quote Nina, and I've got permission to talk about Nina, which was Stephen's girlfriend, majority of his life. She called him her guppies.
uh huh.
She had guppies that would take care of her needs or
Absolutely.
whatever. Even when she was still with Stephen,
Absolutely.
she had guppies. And the term guppy is just basically somebody that's gullible to do it for you because you're a pretty girl and you're giving them a little bit of time and attention.
Mhm.
And most generally, you're not sleeping with them. Hey,
No,
sleeping with them too could happen too.
sure.
So that's not, um,
If you give them the goodies, then they don't keep doing what you
right.
want, though. So you
Exactly.
can't,
Exactly. So you
it's a
string them
whole,
along to
it's a
be able to,
hustle.
yeah,
It's a
it's a
hustle.
hustle. It's a hustle.
It's definitely has selling dreams. That's why I used to tell. I mean, that's so bad, but yeah,
No,
I used to.
and it's very common for women to be able to play that hustle.
Oh,
That's not uncommon. That's pretty regular for how you're managing to maintain your habit
I got
without having to finance it.
well, and I learned that, I got a lot of inappropriate looking back. I mean, I got a lot of inappropriate attention at a young age.
Sure.
Um, I was the girl that was developed before my friends, and so I learned quickly
You
that
utilized it.
yes, I could totally use that to my advantage. And so that just
It
became
was power for you.
for sure. And it just became a skill. I mean, it was like a skill I refined,
Yeah.
and so in this looking, telling this story to you, it's so funny because like the things that I don't know, it's just I've lived like a whole hell of a lot of life. And to even have an opportunity to sit here today just blows my mind. And that person that I was and sitting here talking to you about the Sarah, I know that that was me, but it just seems so far removed of like, I don't even know.
Well, I'm set over here listening to your story, and it's so similar to my own story as a kid growing up. The difference was there was a point where I walked and turned and went the other direction.
Mm,
And I never really looked back. I mean, I know that there was inappropriate things that as a kid I seen and did and took part of. I called it experimenting with drugs and alcohol and all of those growing pains of that generation. And I don't know how I managed to get through it
Mhm.
without it sucking me in. I managed somehow to step away from it. Maybe it was marrying Steven's dad, who was a active Marine at the time,
Sure.
made a huge life change. I don't know what it was, but I know I was lucky to escape. Steven was not lucky, did
Mhm.
not escape what he went through. Your story is where you didn't escape
Mhm.
until much later.
Mhm.
So I don't want to interrupt you, but I just want you to know many people walk that same path that you're
Mhm.
describing. It's not just that you were exclusive, the only one doing it. You were one of millions of girls of that generation
Uh-huh.
that was getting inappropriate attention from older men. You figured out how to utilize that to take care of yourself. You were partying on the weekends. All of that was a generation of that's what we did.
Mhm. And
That's
it just
that's what
seemed
having
normal.
a good time
Right.
was.
It seemed
Yeah,
very
right.
normal. It was very normalized. I felt like growing up, in living in that. I mean, like, oh, and I was gonna say earlier, I mean, there was a club out in Kansas back, and it was an 18 and younger club called Pogo's.
Pogos.
Yes.
I knew
I
that one.
had no damn business being in a club at 13 years old.
Yeah.
Yes, the intention behind the club was good. Was it what they thought? Absolutely not. I was exposed to yeah, that could have been a deterrent factor that life was probably not, going to go down the road of fun. Um, but as I got and so I'm kind of all over the place. I feel like when I was in my so this is in my 20s. So I'm married. Well, before I got married, I'm on felony probation. I end up running over a dead body on the highway with my co-defendant in the car with me. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Just a dead body laying in the middle of the interstate?
Uh-huh. Yep. Two cars had hit three car two cars hit him before me and another car hit him after me. He was walking on 70 near downtown by 20th Street, like where and then like in the non-existent shoulder.
Mhm.
And yeah.
Wow.
Mhm. So
That in itself is pretty traumatizing, I'm sure.
uh-huh. That was looking back now, like, I didn't get any counseling or nobody talked to me about that, like, at all. Like, I just went about my life, and that was just, like, something that happened to me.
Mhm.
And now, I'm sure that had some type of effect
Of
on
course
me.
it did.
I was terrified I was gonna be arrested for vehicular homicide, and I was really nervous that I was gonna be in trouble because I'm my co-defendant from the felony cases that
Mhm.
clearly says I'm not supposed to be around is in the car with me.
And it's documented now.
Yes, and, it that I would like to say that was a wake-up call to get right, but I don't it wasn't. I didn't have any consequences, and I'll say this a few times. That's a big thing that I can tell you that I didn't have consequences for my actions
Yeah.
a lot. I wasn't held accountable. I didn't have a level of responsibility, I was good at getting myself out of situations. And I feel like that's something that I learned watching my parents, so
Mhm.
I watched them finesse and, work things to get to their benefit. And so I honed in on that as a kid
Yeah.
and just continued to do that. And so, after that instance happened, I remember then I feel like that's when the Xanax thing became more of a common thing. I feel like those are related. Um, after that incident on the highway. 'Cause nobody talked to me about it, so that was just something that happened, and we're gonna keep going, and I had taken Xanax a few times before that, but I remember distinctively, like, seeking out the
So you were
Xanax.
probably self-medicating to deal with some of the crap
Uh-huh.
that you should have been dealing with it in other ways.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And through all of this, I can say today, the mental health thing has always been, like, that's been a constant that I never got mental health treatment until I was in my 20s, and we'll talk about that, but, I that was never something my family never talked about it, so, um it's just like we're gonna pretend it's not there type
Right.
deal.
Right.
So
Yeah. I mean, I mean, I feel like our parents didn't have any other skill set to know
right, and
anything more
I'm not angry.
because we were told to shut up and suck it
Mhm,
up,
mhm.
and, I can remember, um, I can remember as a young girl, starting my period and just going to my mother probably 6 months into having my period going, "I hate this. Why do we have to have periods?" I was a little girl, and I remember my mom looking at me and she says, "You know how many millions of women have had their periods in their life? What makes you so special that you shouldn't have one?"
Right,
And she was dead serious.
right.
She didn't sit me down and talk to me about the
What's
what's
happening?
happening to my
Right.
body, or
Uh-huh.
she just basically said, "These are your options, figure it out."
I didn't even get that much, so
Right.
I distinctively remember that time in my life. I
Yeah.
had my first period. I was terrified to call
Mhm.
my mom. I was at the movie theater and I called my mom and I was like, "I just got my period." And she's like, "Oh, now are you gonna have sex?" And I'm like, "What?" Like,
Right.
I remember that
Right.
was the conversation. It
Yeah.
wasn't like, "This is what you do," or "How
Oh, no, my
you."
mom had to get on the phone, tell all of her
Oh,
friends.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just tell
Sit at the
everybody.
kitchen table smoking a Marlboro, smoking my mom uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Salem 100.
Oh, yeah, my Benson and Hedges 100s
Yeah.
over here.
But yeah, I can only, some of this trauma that we experienced as kids is just simply the age that we were and the lack of information our
Sure.
parents had to help raise us. Um, so as much as I can relate to it, at the same time, I also feel kind of badly for our parents because they didn't get the help they needed either.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
definitely, I think that's a big piece of that. My family, for certain, nobody was getting anybody any help, and
My mother had lost her husband. She was 31? Maybe I mean, I no, 27. My mother lost her husband at the age of 27.
Mhm.
She just lost her mind at home,
Oh, I'm sure.
and nobody,
Gave her any support?
nobody showed up to help mow the yard or take care of
No.
anything. She just had to raise a baby on her own, or had to I was 6 at the time.
It's still really hard.
She was, "Oh, your house is paid for because your husband had a death benefit that paid your house off. Good luck."
Mhm.
And, yeah, so, I mean, our parents just didn't have the support that we now take for granted, you
Well,
know?
I think the support's a lot of it. I know in my family, we just didn't talk. It
Yeah,
was such a superficial. There was never just within my immediate family, but even in my extended family, like, we would just get together on, holidays and everybody fake like they like each other. I don't talk to you guys. Like, you don't even know me.
yeah.
And, it just and nobody's gonna show up on Christmas and be like, "Oh, my life's a shit show." Like, that's
Right,
not what we're
right, yeah,
doing. And,
all those big happy family gatherings, it was because there was Jim Beam and everybody else,
uh-huh.
and we were here because, because grandmother expected us to be here.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And I remember getting the talk on the way. "You better act right when we're
yeah,
inside here."
yeah.
Okay.
Mind your P's and Q's.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then as I got older, you can start seeing this happening. And
Mhm.
I'm not one that's really good at shutting my mouth, especially when I think shit's weird. I just like to ask, like, cause and I remember, like, I have one older cousin. I come from 14 cousins on my mom's side. And so my oldest cousin was in prison the majority of, like, from the time he was 16, the majority of
Mhm.
his 20s. And at Christmas, he would call and no one would say that he was in prison. We weren't allowed to say that. He was just on vacation. What?
My mother did that about Steven too. My mother at a family reunion, somebody asked about Steven. He's out discovering himself. Discovering himself in the Department of Corrections.
Right.
I just looked at her and he was my child. I just looked at her. I went, "Okay, whatever shit show you want to believe, whatever." And I turned around and walked away because I was like, "Yeah, I really don't want my family to know all of this." But my mom just really laid it on.
Uh-huh.
I personally would have just said, "It's none of your business where he's at."
Right. I think in my family, it was just, that I can see how much we didn't talk about just in that one instance.
Mhm.
That one instance, it was such a sign. Well, it was, we don't want to stress your grandparents out. What? They're pushing 5 to accept the call. They know he's in prison.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
it's not like
Exactly.
they don't know. It
I mean,
was just
the hurt's already there.
right. And it
It's
that
already there.
and I just, I remember that as a kid, like, okay, we're not going to talk about anything. So I just continued my whole
Right.
life
You were conditioned. Yeah.
absolutely to do the same thing.